is having a great night. I just wanted to celebrate last week something really cool that hasn't really happened at this campus in a really long time. But you guys know, I've said this a few weeks in a row, probably a month, that when we have things like one big party, like we had last week, so many times we have like way less high schoolers than we normally have. And I know it's because you guys are like, oh, these middle schoolers, oh, they're snot, running around everywhere. It's not fun. Like I totally know because you've told me, which is great. But I'm glad you can tell me that. But last week, now I don't know, it's so crazy, but literally, we usually have 2/3 to 3/4, like more middle schoolers than we do have on high schoolers on one big party or SKO, big events that we have. And last week, we literally had half and half. I was blown away, and I know you guys are like, oh, cool, it's not really a big deal. It is a big deal to me. And I just want to say, y'all are freaking killing it. And what that shows me is that you guys are in your school, you're talking to your friends, you're bringing your friends and who are far from God, hopefully. And last week, so many decided to follow Jesus for the first time, and it was awesome. And so I just want to say, as your pastor, like, I'm so proud of you guys. I'm proud that you chose to do that. That you chose to come. I'm proud that you chose to bring your friends. I'm proud that, man, I get to be in this room with you guys every single Wednesday night. So I just want to say, you're freaking killing it. Great job. And I'm excited about tonight. So before we jump in to what we're going to do, I know you've heard me pray once and you're going to hear me pray again at the end, but we're going to pray really quick. God, thank you for this night. Thank you for every student who's in this room. Thank you for this series. I pray that through it, you would be lifted up. God, I pray that we would feel challenged leaving this room tonight, to grow in our faith, to grow closer to who you want us to be, God, and that we would just live our faith unashamedly in front of the world around us. We love you. In your name, amen. Okay, we are starting a new series this week called Talents. It's just a 2-week series this week and next week. Talents is basically us like, you know, hey, we're talented, right? So that's kind of what the talent show was about earlier. Thank you, Audrey, for that really cool card trick. That was awesome. I can't do things like that. I can just spit water out of my 2 front teeth. That was my talent. Thank you. Thank you. Listen, growing up, I did that. People got so grossed out by it, and it's fine. It's gross. I'm spitting water out of my mouth. But I will say, growing up, when I was a teenager, oftentimes I would look around, and maybe you are like me in this, I would look around and I would see people who I felt like were really talented at something. And I kind of felt like God missed the boat. Like I missed the boat when it came to talents, and I didn't really have many talents to offer, to give. I didn't feel like I was really good at anything, to be honest with you. And I was always struggled with this. So much of my growing up life, my teenage life, even into my 20s, the beginning of my 20s, I always was like, God, you forgot me. You forgot me when you were handing out all the talents. All my friends, can do all these cool things and they're smart or whatever, but like you totally forgot me when it came to talents. And it wasn't until years later, like I said, probably my early 20s, when I really began to see the way that God had blessed me and given me talents. They just weren't necessarily the things that I had been looking for, you know? And really the cool thing is they weren't things that other people had. And so I had always been looking at other people like, man, I wish I had that, or I didn't, you know, like, it's easy for us, right, to look at other people and say, man, they're really talented. Look at what they can do. And then look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, man, you're not that great, right? Maybe you've done that before. I've done that. When you hear the word talents, maybe you're like me in this, where you think of like things like this, like people who are really good at art, like they're talented people. People who are good musically, like they can play an instrument, that's talent, right? Or people who play sports and they're good at sports and all of that. Or maybe people who are just like stinking smart and they know everything, they're brainiacs and they don't even have to study for tests and they ace everything and they're like the top in their class and they don't even try. Like these are things that we think about when we think of talents. But the point of this week and next week is to prove that God, He's entrusted each and every one of us with something. And He is empowering us to use that something. You may not have everything, but every single one of us in this room, we have something to give. You guys have probably seen this going around on Instagram like I have, but these are 10 things that require 0 natural talent, and there's something that you can be good at. So 1, being coachable. 2, being prepared, like being prepared for something. Effort, like putting effort into something and trying really hard. Attitude, always a big one, right? Initiative, like having go get it kind of attitude. Caring for others, going above and beyond, like doing a little bit extra than what you're asked. Integrity, body language, and breathing. In case you're like, no, I don't have any of those. You can breathe. So there you go. The fact that you are alive, the fact that I'm alive, that in and of itself, like we have been given the breath to live in this world and to do something. We've been gifted with the value of life. We have worth. You have worth. If you're in this room, you have worth. You are talented. Not only did God give you a talent, but he gave you something to do with that talent. And maybe you're still searching for what that talent is, but I'm telling you, you have a talent or talents, and he gave you something to do with it. I believe that talent is not only a gift, but it is a responsibility that you have. Talent is not only a gift, but it is a responsibility that you have. We have been given a responsibility to take what we have been given and to make the most of it. Not making the most of it, I don't think that means like becoming famous, becoming an influencer, becoming rich, making the most of ourselves, right? I don't think that that's what that means when we talk about talents and the talents we've been giving and making the most of something. No, as Christ followers, if you're a Christ follower in this room, it's not making the most out of what we have, but it's making the most out of making God famous. Taking what we have and what God has given us to elevate him in the world that we live in. The world, and this may be a shock to some of you, just kidding. I don't think anybody in this room, but maybe some of your friends need to know this. The world does not revolve around us. The world should not revolve around you and I, especially if we are Christ followers. The world that we live in should revolve around who Jesus is and the assignment he's given us on this earth. To make his name greater, to bring as many people as we can into heaven with us one day, to make much of who God is. We represent, if you're a Christ follower in this room, we represent God because he has gifted us with his free gift of salvation. The Bible clearly says that we are not our own, but that and because of that, we have a responsibility. 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 says this, "You are not your own, you were bought with a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies." Now, I'm going to tell you guys a story, a parable. We all know that Jesus told stories in the Bible. They're called parables. Back in Jesus' day, the word talent, we're describing it as like something you can do, an innate ability, a natural ability that you have. But back in Jesus' day, a talent actually was like money. That you had. It's actually a measurement of money, whether it was gold, silver, copper, whatever it was like the weight of something. And I think it's fitting for us to understand that our talents, the talents that we have, it's a weight that's been gifted to us. It's a weight that's been gifted to us by God. Not to crush us and for us to feel overwhelming because of something that we're not doing or something that we feel like we can't do, but for us to carry with us and to help multiply the kingdom. Jesus talked about this idea in a parable in the story, and I'm going to start reading it here. It says, "Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 talents to one," so weights of money, 2 talents to another, and 1 talent to the last, dividing it into proportion to their abilities. He then left on his trip. Now, if you're like me, you're thinking, at least and probably now a little bit if I'm like in an unhealthy place, but when I was your age, I would have thought, I'm the one. Jesus, the man that was giving out the talents, he probably would have just given me one based on my ability when I was a teenager. That's how I would have felt. And maybe you're thinking, maybe you're like, it's not fair. My talent, my ability is just as great as everyone else's. He should have chosen people who were equal and given out like different talents or whatever. Maybe you're feeling a little bit sorry for the guy who just got the one talent. But let me tell you, a talent equaled then 20 years of working every single day. So 20 years, one talent, one weight of money equaled 20 years of working every single day. So if we look at like the average salary in Texas, if you Google it, it's like $56,000 something, $536. And if you to multiply that by 20 years, that's over $1 million. So technically, we can say that the man who got one talent still got over $1 million. Now, not everybody got like all of the money, but everybody got something, and everything they got was valuable, right? It wasn't invaluable by any means. I mean, who would say no to $1 million? See, that's what I thought. Nobody would say no to $1 million. And so he still got something. Now, I think that something that you and I do, I know I do this. Now, I cannot speak for everybody in this room, but I can speak for myself. Something that weighed me down for so much of my life is I was too concerned about what other people got, and I did not care or steward well, or I did not look at or use well what God had given me. Because I was too busy looking around at what everyone else got, and I thought, it's not fair that they got that and I didn't get that, right? It's not fair that happened. It's not fair. I spent too much of my life thinking statements like that, beginning statements like that, it's not fair. When in reality, what I should have done is saying, okay, I'm not gonna, do whatever you gotta do. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna worry about what God has put in my hands. And that's what I'm gonna be concerned about. And I'm telling you, the reason I'm even saying this is because I'm telling you, I wasted so many years of my life worried about what everyone else got and not thinking about what I got and how I could use it to make the kingdom of God greater. And I don't want you to get stuck in that trap like I got stuck in. It's a terrible merry-go-round, and it does something mentally to you that is just exhausting. When, in reality, I had something that I could give. And I was choosing not to look at what was in my hands, but what was in the hands of everyone else. We're going to keep reading. The servant who received the 5 talents began to invest the money and earn 5 more talents. The servant with 2 talents also went to work and earned 2 more. The point here is that the good servants felt the responsibility of their assignment. They felt the responsibility of the talents that had been given to them, and they went to work without delay. They didn't worry about what each other got. They knew that they had been given something, and they knew that they could do more with it. And so that's what they did, and they gained more because of it. We're going to keep reading. But the servant who received the 1 talent dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they had used this money, his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, "Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 5 more." The master was full of praise. "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount," small amount, he must be real rich because I'm small. I mean, that'd be over $10 million, $5 million. "So now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." What's so cool about this scripture is I think it shows, I don't think it was necessarily that the master was hoping that his servant would double the money, but what he said is, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." I think that God is looking for good and faithful people who will take the talents that they've been given and use them for his glory. He's looking for people who will stay focused on being good and being faithful to all that God has called them to be. Moving on, the servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more." The master said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." We see it there again. "You have been faithful in handling the small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." Listen, God is, when you meet God one day, when you get to heaven, I'm telling you, God's not going to ask you what your church did. He's not going to ask you what your parents did. He's not going to ask you what your best friend did. He's going to look at what he gave you and he's going to say, "What did you do with that?" He's not asking the people around you. He's asking you. Verse 24 says, "Then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came and said, 'Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back.'" Honestly, we can say what the servant did, the work that he did is nothing. Like, he didn't work, he didn't think, he didn't even try. He literally just made excuses about why he didn't use what had been given him. Verse 26, "But the master replied, 'You wicked and lazy servant, if you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you at least deposit my money in a bank? I could have gotten some interest on it.' Then he ordered, 'Take the money from my servant and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away from them. Now throw this useless servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." You can find that parable in Matthew 5:14 through 30. The whole point, I think, of this entire parable, I think this entire message tonight is this: faithfulness will always be better and greater than success. A question I think we all should ask ourselves tonight is, am I faithful? And I think the way that you can answer that is by answering this question: have I been obedient with what God has given me? Our job is not to get more than what we have. Honestly, it's just to steward well what we do have. Our job is to steward what we have been given. Our readiness one day for Jesus' return, his triumphal entry when he comes and gets us, is determined by if we steward the resources that he has given us well. What have we done with our talents? What have we done with our knowledge? What have we done with our time? What have we done with our money? What have we done with our abilities? The sin of omission, which is what we don't do, so omission is what we don't do. The sin of omission may ultimately be more dangerous than the sin of commission, which is what we do. What we do. The sin of omission may ultimately be more dangerous than the sin of commission. For years and years, there were things. One, I thought I'd missed the boat. I thought that God hadn't given me something to steward well and to give. That was my own fault. Maybe you're like me in that regards tonight. For years, also, I spent too much time looking at what other people had and not focusing on what I had. And I think that some of us in this room, you're like me. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I'm almost done. But I'm going to tell you a quick story. I think maybe you're like me, where maybe you've tried to use something that God has given you and you failed at it. I've always prided myself. I have a gift of hospitality, I guess. I like to have people in my house. I like to cook for them. I like people to feel comfortable in my place. I feel like I'm a pretty good cook. You can ask my kids and see if they think that, but I feel like I'm a pretty good cook. Thank you. So they both gave me thumbs up. You guys, thanks. We didn't even plan that, and they would be truthful, I promise you. So, for years and years, I felt like the gift of hospitality was just, and it is a thing that I love and something that I just I feel like I'm gifted at. And I love having people over and doing things and like hanging out with them and, spending time together and building relationships. I just love doing it. And so years ago, when I was probably in my mid-20s, I had some friends over and I cooked this basic meal. Literally, it was chicken tenders. I know it seems basic, and it is. But I did homemade. I'm like, these are gonna be great, homemade, whatever. Made all this, thought I felt, had done a great job. Had everyone sit down, they started eating, and all of a sudden, they started looking around at each other, and I went, took a bite of the chicken tender. This thing was so salty. I'm telling you what, I had probably used more salt than flour in it, and I'd like spit it out, and I was like, stop eating it, don't, I'm not gonna feel bad if you stop eating it. Like, this tastes terrible. And we laugh about it now. It was actually some of my cousins, and we laugh about it now and just think it's funny. I was married then. My husband can tell you the story. It's just so funny. And I was devastated by it, though, because I felt like this was a gift that I had, and I had failed at it. And I think that sometimes we try things, and we try one time, and we think, oh, I'm not good at it. I'm not going to do it again. And I think that that's wrong on our part, and that's a sin on our part, because I feel like when we know that God has gifted us with something, sometimes it's not going to be perfect every time. And there are going to be times we try and we fail, and sometimes we just have to get up and we have to keep trying again. And now, I don't use too much salt usually. I can't say I've ever made chicken tenders again, I'll tell you that. But I cook a lot at my house. I bake, I do all the things. And I feel like one of the things, now this is so minor and so whatever, and I get it's cooking, I understand like this isn't like this really big grand thing, which not all talents are, and that's okay. But I think what we have to remember tonight is that when we are faithful, and that means that sometimes it's going to be hard to push through, that's when we will see success. So, who are you going to be? There were 3 servants in this story. 2 of them, they valued what was given to them, and they made much of it. And the last one, he hid everything that he had and really disappointed the person that, man, could have changed his life. Tonight, you and I, we get to decide what we're going to do with what we've been given. Even if you're unsure of what you've been given something. And so maybe it's time for us to really start seeking that out and focusing on like, God, what have you given me, and how can you use it? How can you use it in my life so that the world around me and my world can see that the most important thing in my life is you? Would y'all pray with me? God, thank you for every single person in this room. Thank you for all that you're doing in our hearts and our lives. I pray this week as we start really focusing maybe on who you are to us, what you're doing in our lives. God, I pray that you would begin to first show up for those people who feel like they've been forgotten. Much of my life, I felt like that, my teenage life. And so I pray, God, that you would show up for them and show them the gifts and the abilities that you've given them, God, that are so unique and special to who they are, God, and how with those gifts they play a part in your plan and in your story for this earth. God, I pray for everyone in this room who they know their talents, they know their abilities, but they're not using them to make your name greater, whatever that looks like. And maybe they don't even know how. Maybe they know what their talent is, but they don't know how to use it to make your name greater. God, I pray that you would begin to reveal and show people in this room how to use their talents for you. And God, lastly, I pray for that person who they have their talent, and maybe they're not using it necessarily because they feel like they've failed at something and it's been really hard to pick themselves up and to keep moving forward. God, I pray that you would give them the courage and the boldness, God, that they need to just try again. God, be with us tonight. Help us as we try so hard to move to the center of your purpose for our life, God, that we would be able to use everything you've given us to do that. We love you. In your name. Everyone said, amen.